order at 6:33. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next we have agenda review. Any items to add or change?
The only thing I would say is that when you do the transportation bid award, you would likely want to have a finding for executive session to discuss contract, possible contract. Obviously coming out afterwards to make a determination.
Okay. Do that. All right. Next is correspondence, visitors, and public comment. I'll start with board members. Does anybody have any correspondence they'd like to share? See none. I know there are. Oh, Terry.
We did get correspondence, but I imagine the people are here that sent the correspondence.
I believe so. We did. Yeah, we the whole group received some correspondence about the presentation we're going to see in a few minutes on proficiency-based grading, and I think a few of those folks are here to make public comment. So, anyone? How many would like to make public comment? Or a couple? All right.
I'd just like a couple minutes.
So come on up. Just make sure you state your full name for the minutes.
Okay, I am James Sullivan, Jim. I am on the Ag Advisory Committee. I'm the chairperson. I just want to give a heads up, and I'd like to get on the agenda maybe next month if that's possible. We're planning on having a meeting here just because everything is, I don't know if everybody's up to speed on the ag, but we're in pretty big. We got a teacher leaving, but we got to get back. We had a meeting with the state, so there's a couple things we need to get straightened out. So I'm going to come, hopefully, if I can get on the agenda for next month. I'd like to come with some wants and some needs. There is some, basically needs are better because they're going to be of some needs. But the ag is kind of in a big to-do, and I know they can catch up on speed on a lot of it. But just to give a heads up, so if you could just let me know if I can get on the agenda next month and what date. And I'll try and get a meeting before then with my committee and get a list of things we need. But the ag is in kind of a situation because we're losing teachers. And I think we need to replace we need at least 2 more. Maybe even possibly 3. But just to give you all a heads up, I will be back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This gentleman here worked very closely with us, came to MVU board meetings. I don't think he spoke every meeting, but he was invited to speak at every meeting, giving us updates. At one point, I really felt very good because he and our curriculum person were working very closely together on the advisory committee. The board did some site visits, very impressed, very positive. And then the pandemic came, and we really didn't meet in person, so we didn't certainly meet with students. But this is good, and I'm sure that whatever he brings will be sincere and in the best interest of students. So I second the idea of making sure we get him on the agenda. That's good.
Thank you.
It's done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Had another, I believe. Come on up.
So my name is Jennifer Bailey, and my daughter is a senior at MVU, and I have a son who's in 8th grade. I've already provided some of the board members with the information, my notes from our last meeting at MVU. Jen gave a really good presentation about how the proficiency grading had developed over the years and where we're at now. given my personal experience and some issues and many parents that I've spoke with, I think we have like 30 parents now that are in our little chat group, and some of them are here. So we are asking the school to switch, not away from proficiency grading, but just to change how we're doing it. To do a more granular system where they're tracking to the 3.2, 3.4, so forth. And if possible, to include a letter grade next to, on the transcript next to the number grade, so that colleges, parents can understand what the grading is. We also feel that all classes you should be able to obtain a 4, and it should be clear to the student at the beginning of the school year what it is that needs to be done in order to obtain that 4. Clear communication to the parents and to colleges, whether it's through the guidance counselor, what the grade is and what it actually means, because if you are applying for a college outside of Vermont, they are not understanding this proficiency grading as we had hoped. Most colleges that my daughter has applied to outside of Vermont has considered the 3 of D. And I don't feel that is a good representation of my daughter and what her abilities are. And many classes, especially the first few years, freshman, sophomore years, many classes she wasn't even able to obtain a 4. It wasn't offered to her. It wasn't even given out. Like, they didn't even offer it. So to say that her 3s that she got in those classes were Ds is not accurate at all, but unfortunately that's how the colleges are looking at it. I feel like it's not a matter of whether they're getting accepted in the college, which is important. I mean, we're still waiting to hear on 2 colleges she's applied to outside of Vermont. But it's also important, if they got accepted, were they offered merit scholarships if their grades and their, my daughter's a National Honor Society, National Arts Honor Society. She volunteers regularly. She took every AP class she could take. She probably has the most credits of a senior in her class. And many of the colleges that she did get accepted to did not offer her any merit scholarships. We did go back to one and explain the grading system a little better to them. They reviewed her, and they did end up offering her some merit scholarships. So it's taking a lot of work in order to get what she deserves without having to do all that work. And today I took the time to figure out, based on emails, phone calls, meetings that I've had with colleges, with the school board at MVU, the school at MVU, and it's 80 hours is what I came up with. 50 of those hours were emails. Almost 20 hours in phone calls and about 11 hours in meetings. A lot of parents aren't going to have this time. I felt like I owed it to my daughter because she worked so hard in the 4 years that she was in high school for her not to be offered merit scholarships or acceptance into colleges that she's been hoping to get into. I felt like I had to do this for her, and this is my email time and my phone time and my meeting time as well as my daughter's. So she has advocated for herself a lot as well. So after the meeting with Jen, I have the notes. I don't know if everyone got a copy, that's that. And I did have a couple questions that came up in our parent meeting after the meeting with Jen, which we were looking for. It's not just the colleges they got accepted at. We were also wondering how many kids applied to that stretch college and did they get accepted? How many students not only got accepted but were offered merit scholarships? And I don't know if the school keeps track of that or not, but I think we don't want to lose sight of it's not just whether you can get accepted to a college, but will they be able to afford to go to that college because they weren't offered any money? Because the colleges are looking at our 3s as Bs. Then the other thing was, there was mention on they're averaging the last 3, and I'm not sure if it's the last 3 tests, the last 3 assessments or reviews. But if they're averaging the last 3, and say a student got a 3, a 3, and a 4, that's always going to average to a 4, even though they did, a 3, even though they did reach the 4 in the progression. So I'm confused at how that would be a good method to determine. My feeling is if once they reach the 4, well, they obtained that 4 and they reached it, they should get a 4 as a grade. I had one parent ask, they looked at their kid's power school and they got 2 3s and 2 4s of what they could see on the particular subject in power school, but the student got a grade of 3 on their report card. So they were like, well, they got 2 4s, why am I seeing a 3? So I feel like the parents still, like the power school and the grading system, especially with it being a 4-point grading system, is really hard to comprehend how the school's coming up with things. Let alone the students, because I do ask my kids regularly and they do say, I don't know, I feel like I didn't quite grasp that. Then I'll go to their progress meetings, the school conference, and glowing remarks about my student. They're all doing great and whatever. And my kid's like, well, I just don't feel comfortable in that class. I feel like I'm not fully grasping it. But yet they got their 3, so you're doing great. So I feel like there's still some lack of understanding on the student side as well. And I've asked the school several times if they've ever plotted a graph of chart showing the 2022 seniors this year, what their cumulative rating is, and how that looks. Like, is it, from what I can understand, most students get 3s because you can't move on or past that class without a 3. So there's a lot of 3s. So most students are very similar, which doesn't give colleges, for those students who have tried to excel, an option for seeing how they're better than the others. And unfortunately, I was talking with him right when we got here, Mr. Palmer, he said college applications are really high this year, so this is very cursory, like, look. And if we got a rating on here that doesn't necessarily reflect what a student actually is achieving, they're not going to get the merit scholarships and they're not going to get accepted to those stretch schools. And I have a copy of this too for the board. I think that's all I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions or...
Well, we won't during the public comment time.
Okay.
If folks do, you've sent us an email, so we do have your contact information.
Yes.
And we will be hearing a similar presentation to what you all saw the other night, and so we'll have our chance to ask some questions.
Okay, and I just want to end with, I have put in 9 months of trying to make this a better system. I do have a son, obviously, that's coming up through the system as well, but I just think we owe it to the students to improve it. No system ever created is perfect from the beginning, and if we haven't made changes to a system and we're learning now that it's not working, then we should take the time to make it better.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comments?
I didn't put my name down, but I can.
Sure, come on up and just make sure you state your name for the minutes.
Can we do a check-in to see if the virtual people can hear us?
Oh, sure. We get a thumbs up online if you can hear us. All right. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Lauren Howe. I'm from Swanton. My kids, this only just came about in my awareness about a week and a half ago. I have twins who are in 7th grade, and so I'm not in the same boat as Jen yet, but concerned. I don't want to be there by the time that they're seniors, and so she talked a lot of, and I don't know what information the board received before tonight in terms of Jen's presentation, which was great, but talks more historical about more historical information than the now and kind of where we're at now. So maybe that was added. But this seems to be the first graduating class that is fully impacted by proficiency-based grading. And so I would be most interested in what these current kids have to say that are outgoing. When I left the meeting last week, I looked on our school's website to find a vision statement or a mission. What do we hope to get out of our graduating class? Or what is the end game? I heard a lot at the presentation about all students succeeding and all students rising to proficiency. And that is, I think we want all kids to succeed. But if a grading system is perhaps stunting our most promising students or students who have aspirations outside of MVU and beyond, then I would question if it is in fact ensuring success for all. It's something that other schools in the state and in the country have tried, and I don't know of any. I did some quick searching, and I don't know of any other schools that have been able to fully swing in this way and not revert to some kind of, I guess, more granular system or something that looks a little bit more familiar to colleges. And as Jen said, you know, a lot of families aren't, I'm an educator as well, a lot of families and parents aren't going to have the time or the capability to reach out to schools and be the advocate that she has been. And so I guess my hope is that the school board and that our administrators would use this as an opportunity to advocate for them. It seems like it could potentially be a simple fix. I don't think I heard any parents that were arguing the point of proficiency-based learning or teaching or wanting all kids to succeed, but this doesn't seem to be what this ultimately gets at. And so my concern is, at least for this current graduating class, they've really lost the last 4 years of potential impact. And her daughter's put in a great amount of effort and sounds like a wonderful student. And for her to have to put in 80 hours of her own time, getting into college is tricky enough. But then to be able to afford to go, I don't know if she used the actual numerical value, but the one school that she got to look at her daughter's transcripts, after having been told they don't do that, they don't give you a second glance, then awarded her $48,000 over the course of 4 years. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of money. And I have twins, and so it'll be at the same time. And so I know that you're all fiscally aware too. That's part of the school board, and I mean, it's a reality that for a lot of kids, that's going to have just as much of an impact, if not more, than the getting in. They might not have a first and second and third choice. They might just want to get in. But those merit scholarships could mean just an even greater deal. I guess my other thought as I was listening to Jen speak is that, you know, I don't know if any of the graduating seniors' families, parents, guardians, or the students themselves could have predicted where they're at now. I think the intent was good. It sounds like it was good, and comes from a law that none of us in this room wrote. However, there is some leeway in changing this system and how you report out on student learning, and I'm hoping that the board insists that it gets looked at swiftly. Is there other schools in the area that are making it work? How is that? What do colleges want to see? And do we have a vision or a mission statement? Because that's a question. I couldn't find it. Is there one? Like, what do we hope for all of our MVU graduates? Is it simply to graduate? Or, I'm not being flip when I say that, but is it to be career and life ready? Is it to be, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure our mission was on there.
We actually have.
I think it exists, yeah. But I was looking around, so
We're finishing a portrait of a graduate process.
Ah, okay.
We're trying to condense all of the input we've had for 2 years on what are those characteristics that are most important of a graduate of our school district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
okay.
we have that piece that
So
we've
it's
been
coming.
working toward.
Yep, okay. I mean, my vote is it has something to do with being a lifelong learner. And that comes in different forms for different kids. But for those that want to go on to college, this is a huge deal. And not everybody will, and that's fine. But the other thing that at least I heard a lot of last week and I think I said this earlier, but I'll reiterate and then I'll go sit down, is if proficiency-based grading or this way of reporting out is meant for all kids to show success or become proficient, it's not what it's reporting. Certainly not in a way that makes sense to everyone that's reading that information. Because one of the big takeaways for me was absolutely, as an educator, as a mom, I know that kids learn at different paces and we want them all to have the same opportunity to show growth and proficiency. But a student's ability to show that proficiency early on versus a year later looks the same on this transcript. And then with little to no opportunity to score fours, you are then stunted to an automatic B, potentially, which has greater impact the more you go on.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yep.
Sure.
Just real quick, Andre Matthew from Swanton, and I believe I tried to get a letter to all of you. Hopefully it made it to most of you. And I don't want to go over any of that. You have that to read, but just sitting here, one thing I did not bring up in that letter was during Jen's presentation, she discussed the amount of collaboration that went into developing this system over the last decade or so. I think it was about that long. And I asked the question at the meeting, how much collaboration is going on between schools and school districts now? And it sounded like, and maybe it's because of COVID, who knows, but it sounded like that's really waned and there's not a lot of back and forth anymore. So that's one thing I was hoping to see is that we would engage with other districts to see what's working, what's not, and maybe that would help us to adjust accordingly. There's one other thing, and it's totally escaping me right now, but it's all in the letter.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone online for public comments? You can use the raise your hand function. Not seeing any. All right, that will conclude public comment portion of the meeting. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, meeting minutes from March 22nd. Anyone?
I'll make the motion to approve the March 22nd
Toby's
meeting
up
minutes
first.
as presented.
Rennett's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the March 22nd meeting minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? I'll abstain. I was not in attendance, so 6-0-1 passes. All right, next we have a presentation, proficiency reporting and grading, and I believe Jen.
Alright. I'm gonna try and share the screen for Jen, which is part of what I've been looking at, so I can find that properly and make sure it's smooth.
Two people to your side.
I'm good, thank you. We have.
It's the same way.
Sue.
Coming around is a packet of materials that was shared with parents last Wednesday night is when we met. And the presentation I have for you tonight is an abbreviated version of that presentation from last Wednesday. Julie told me I had to be a little faster this time, so I will work hard to do that. So I'll talk a little bit about what you have within the contents of the packet as we move through. It's largely the same presentation as last Wednesday night. Wanted to make sure that we had that meeting and this meeting before we convened a group to start working on the improvements that we need to make. So each school year when we have kind of our faculty meetings related to grading, I start with this quote from Rick Romelli, who is a middle school expert, I would say. He consults nationally in best practices in middle school, and he does a lot of work around grading as well. And the idea that grading is communication and not compensation is a really large cultural shift for secondary schools in particular. I know personally I've been working to try to change my language a little bit away from earn being a grade towards showing evidence and documenting what students know and can do. It's a very significant shift, probably the largest shift in secondary education in about 100 years. So it's yes.
I just have a question. Why? I'm just curious. This is a middle school person.
Mm-hmm.
Does he talk about high school too?
Yes, his expertise is in middle school, but he does work. He does collaborate.
Because that's what I was just trying, in terms of credibility, I was trying to transfer. How does that do?
Mm-hmm. I would say.
Okay.
So within the next slide is our basic agenda. I'll talk a little bit about our purpose and goals with using proficiency-based grading. I will provide some historical context for how the change came about. Talk a little bit about grade calculation and reporting, have some frequently asked questions, and then future improvements. Within the packet that you have, on the first several pages are testimonials from teachers about how the system has improved their practice. Then there are several examples of learning scales, which are really key and critical in proficiency-based learning. Then you'll find the school profile, which is the document that we share with colleges so that they have the information that they need when reviewing student admissions. And then the very final page is a sample of the transcript that we're currently using, and it is in English. So Act 77, when it was passed in 2013, had three main components: proficiency-based graduation requirements, flexible pathways, and personalized learning plans. And at the crux of proficiency-based graduation requirements is proficiency-based learning, and really getting students to those guaranteed outcomes. Act 77 does not require proficiency-based grading, specifically in the statute, but proficiency-based grading allows for better implementation of proficiency-based learning. So when we're talking about proficiency-based grading, the goals that we're really working towards are communicating clearly with students and families and teachers about what students know and can do in relation to those prioritized standards. That students know what proficiency looks like and what they need to do to demonstrate that they're proficient. That teachers use assessments to plan for instruction and intervention to ensure all students reach proficiency on standard. And that there's flexibility within a structure for students to demonstrate what they know and they can do in personalized ways. So you might be asking, how is this different than before? So there's a couple transitions. Thank you, Julie. So traditional grading practices were really focused on selecting and sorting students, ranking students, and they inherently assumed that not all students were going to reach proficiency or even pass. The outcomes were not necessarily standards-based, and the practices varied widely from classroom to classroom, not just school to school. I know that when I started in my career, how I calculated my grades was not the same as how my coworkers calculated their grades. It was completely different from classroom to classroom. And often we had very rigid and isolated criteria for what success looked like, that you had to show success in a very specific way. And these grades combined academic outcomes, but also behaviors related to participation, being prepared, whether you're submitting your work on time, those sorts of things. So in a proficiency-based system, the focus is really focused on equity and making sure that all students are able to reach proficiency in ways that are personalized but also allow for their specific needs. That the instruction is designed at the rigor of the standard, and I think that that is a really important piece to focus on. The standards that we use now, the Common Core standards, the Next Generation Science standards, the C3 Social Studies standards, are more rigorous than the standards that were used 15 years ago. And they often include verbs like analyze, synthesize, evaluate, not identify and define. And so the standard is more rigorous and getting students to that standard is more complex. The outcomes are more consistent. I know that we've heard from the community that they are not consistent, and we can work toward that, but they are more consistent than they used to be. And that it's flexible, there are flexible pathways and products for learners, and the grades separate out academic and behaviors. So the transition, as Andre said earlier, we've been working on this transition for close to 10 years, and I won't talk about all the specific steps, but I wanted to make sure that we communicated the purpose and intention that we designed the system for. So the first transitions that we went through go back to 2013 and 15. We started to really think about how we were going to have more consistency across grading practices as a school. So one of our transitional steps was using a traditional grade, but calculating that grade in the same way across classrooms, and we call that 60-20-20. And then we used a specific tool to transfer a 1 to 4 scale to a 1 to 100 scale, and we would use that tool to help us enter things into the grade book. And we provided more opportunities for students to demonstrate what they will and can do. In 2015 and 16, we continued to use that system. We updated some of the procedures that we had to support that system. We discontinued some practices that weren't really focused on learning, and we created some expectations for how things were entered into the grade book. And we started to attend these regional collaborations and trainings that were available throughout Vermont. There were standards-based gradings. There was a standards-based grading symposium. We had some training from Arizona Research as well. In 2016 and 17, we created a monthly committee to work on planning the implementation, and we sent teams to trainings. There were a lot of trainings in this time frame that the Champlain Valley Educator, I don't even know the right acronym for that. The CVED is what we call it. Yeah, I'm not even sure what it stands for, but they sponsored a lot of trainings for schools and school leaders to learn about the system within this time frame. We developed and shared a transition timeline, and we shared a proposal for starting implementation in the 2017 and 18 school year for our middle school students. And then we used our faculty time to really focus on the background knowledge that they would need in order to implement this system. And we started to work with PowerSchool to figure out how to do the logistics in the database. So 2017 and 18 was the first year that we used proficiency-based grading, and we rolled it out in grade 7 and 8 only at first, and we created a proficiency-based report card, which needs some improvement. And we had a parent event back in the fall of 2017. We implemented our school-wide habits of work, which also needs some improvement. And that was the first time that the behaviors that we were reporting on were consistent across the school. And we continued to collaborate and attend those expert trainings.
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry, Emma. But when you say they were consistent, you mean like all the science teachers had the expectations for 7th grade, and they were all how they would know if you met, if you met the standard or exceeded the standard.
Right. So if you're looking in the packet that you have, there if you.
I didn't want to go through it without.
Okay. There's so those learning scales, those are consistent for the teachers that teach that particular course. They use the same scales to assess student learning at different points throughout the unit or kind of learning module.
So they're teaching the same stuff.
So that's the intent. And so in 2018 and 19, we had multiple day consultation from PowerSchool to set up the technology side. And that was the first year that the high school implemented proficiency-based grading. We introduced some honors options for students and provided more interventions. We started to plan a flexible intervention time that was going to help students get kind of extra instruction so that all students could meet proficiency. And then we really targeted and supported the training for the teachers who were experiencing this first as well. We made some changes in the 2018-19 school year to the habits of work because we had feedback from families to try to improve it. 2019-20, before things got crazy, so it went into grade 10, so we rolled it up with a cohort so that no students graduated with a hybrid transcript, that we had kind of a clean transcript transition. We added this flexible intervention block, so we had more opportunities to provide supports for students, and we grew the intervention opportunities. We continued the specific trainings. I had after-school drop-ins to help teachers with the mechanics of grading. And when COVID hit, we tried to shift in a way that was purposeful and reflected what we were trying to do with proficiency-based learning. We adopted largely the same procedures that high schools across northwestern Vermont adopted as well at that time. So last year, students were in grade 11, and we spent the time really thinking about making sure the transcript was going to be ready, including on the right-hand side of the transcript, and that's in the very back of your packet. You can see that we have a column for students to put their achievements right on the transcript, and we're very pleased with that addition. We had our AP instructors collaborate to think about how they would transition to proficiency-based grading, and we made sure that we were supporting our students with the interventions that they would need to get to where they need to be. Which brings us to this year. So this is the first graduating class with proficiency-based grading. So we were finalizing a lot of the procedures that we needed to make sure students were ready to exit and move on to the next thing, including the transcripts, the cumulative proficiency level, which is an average that is the average of the scores, which is at the bottom of the transcript, the recognitions and honors that we would have for students, and the school profile, which is in the packet as well. We also did some revision of the ELA curriculum to make sure that we were at the rigor of the Common Core standards. Grade calculations for proficiency-based grading. The grades are cumulative. They continue to update over the course of the year as new learning is achieved. So the most recent scores are the ones that count toward the student's grade. And students in the high school must reach a 3 for proficiency in order to receive credit and move on. Students have multiple opportunities to show that they're proficient, and the course grades only reflect the content standards. The habits of work are reported separately. So the next section I have is a lot of the questions that I often get. So the first question is about whether proficiency-based grading dumbs down the curriculum. And my responses to this question usually have to do with the fact that we're really focused on getting all students to proficiency, and that level of proficiency is at a higher level of rigor than it was 10 or 15 years ago with previous standards. So I would argue that it has raised the expectations for all students, and that students must reach proficiency in order to move on to the next course. It's not possible to squeak by with a 67 and get credit. You have to demonstrate that you can do the skills that we're looking for. So the next question I often get is whether it's more subjective than traditional grading. And lots of answers to this question as well, but purely objective assessments are often not as rigorous as the standards. So I can write a very objective assessment where questions are clearly right or wrong, but usually those are at the identify or define level and not at the higher level of learning around evaluate and synthesize and that the standards outline. performance and demonstration assessments have always been scored subjectively. Whether it was an essay that you wrote yourself in school or a project that you did, those were scored subjectively as well. Students and teachers have the scales ahead of time, so they know what the criteria are, and often there are benchmarks that are provided. And there are lots of different ways to show learning when it comes to these rigorous standards. And so the products that students produce can be varied. And so there would be some subjectivity because the products would vary, but the criteria that they have to meet to show that they know the content or the skill doesn't change. And our teams collaborate to calibrate, they score together and they calibrate to make sure that they're scoring things in a similar way. So the next question I often get, and this is the one that the community has been asking about, is whether a more granular scale, like a 1 to 100 scale or half points, would be more precise. And 100-point scales work really well for those objective assessments, but they don't necessarily work as well for the assessments that are more subjectively scored. We want to make sure that we're communicating clearly, and I can hear from the community that we need to do a better job of that. But a 4-point scale really allows us both structure and flexibility. Students can always return to their learning and show that they know more. It doesn't mean that it's finite and that they have to be finished at a 3 necessarily. Something that I know about myself as a scorer when I was in the classroom is that the reliability of a 100-point scale, or even if there are 8 levels on a scale, is the more levels in the scale, the less reliable it can be between graders and also within the grader themselves. So if I was calibrating with another teacher and I have a 4-point scale, we're more likely to score the same on that 4-point scale than if there are half-level scores in between. Also, I'm more likely at the beginning of my pile to score the same as I am at the end of my pile than if there are multiple levels of scoring. And so that provides more consistency. And I think the 4-point scale really allows teachers to frame the interventions and instruction that they need to do in a nimble way.
Jen, can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
And that would be, how is this different than the practice of rubrics?
It's very similar to it is basically the practice of rubrics. The one of the nuances between the rubrics that we used for Bottom Red Schoolhouse.
Well, I'm thinking for, I mean, it was best practices for a while. So.
I would say that those were more about specific products, and these are intended to be more about the actual learning that's being demonstrated.
I could see these being more strident, like you said, synthesize the different verbs you're using as opposed to just show or demonstrate. I guess my question is, surely there are students who don't meet the standard.
That's correct.
And surely there must be quite a few, I would think. Especially after all the past couple of, all the stuff that's been going on, absenteeism and everything else.
Yep.
So what, do they just keep going to school till they're 25, or what's the?
No, I think that the challenge has been, how do we support teachers to design instruction so that students are getting multiple opportunities and are being retaught. That's why we added our flexible intervention block so that teachers could pull students for a second little shot of the content. We also have intervention times built into the school day where students can get extra support.
So it is built not in the classroom, because I could see where it could have some of the same problems as No Child Left Behind. If no one's getting, if you're working so hard to get people to pass that you're not paying attention to the kids that are.
I would say that it is a challenge to do all of those things within the classroom.
But I had another thing that I just lost it, sorry.
I think that when Act 77 was crafted, the intent was to take the proficiency-based learning and really marry it with the personalized learning so that that did not happen as much because students would have choice and be able to approach their learning in different ways. The actualization of those two things becoming reality has been more challenging perhaps than we anticipated. And not just us as a school. Yeah.
I mean, even if you have wonderful teachers, there's only so many resources.
I would say that we are looking to, as a district, but specifically at MVU, we're looking to universal design for learning and how that can help us create those different pathways and choices for students in a way that is not as overwhelming for teachers. And I think UDL could provide a lot of tools for teachers in that way.
So I guess my last question has to do with mechanics. Some people are talking about averages as opposed to, I heard you say that it's the final grade that counts as the grade.
So it is currently the last 3 scores related to a specific standard are averaged together to create a grade with the other standards that are averaged together.
I don't understand, that's where I'm having a
It's
hard
one of
time
the slides
understanding.
that I took out, I shouldn't have taken it out.
There are multiple, a year-long course has multiple units of study with multiple learning targets and
Gotcha.
proficiencies.
Okay.
So there will be, you may have a unit where it's the only time you're teaching these particular standards. But you may have some standards that you teach all year long.
So the standards you teach all year long,
We would expect at the end of the year for that student to
Yeah.
have learned it at a higher level. And so that's where the,
but if you average it,
It's just the 3 most recent ones. So we are working with teachers to assess frequently. So it's not just big projects and tests that they're putting in, but also observations, conversations, different ways that they've assessed learning so that there are more frequent assessment points.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'll have to talk to you offline because I'm having a hard time understanding how you average proficiency and the distinction of proficiency.
So I have a question. How is it measured? Like specifically, let's take for instance math and English. So English is your proficiency measured, I'm assuming, with like how you write, how you compose sentences, verbs, adjectives, and then it increases over different levels. But like with math, it's pretty, you understand the equations or you don't, you understand the formulas or you don't. So are they doing tests that are then graded and then it's sort of like you get a certain amount right and you are proficient, or you get a certain amount wrong and you may not? Like how is the grading done? And I'm assuming that grading changes over the course of like different grades, right?
So I would say it varies between subject areas, as you started to mention, but it should be getting more complex as students get older, absolutely, based on the standards that we're assessing. If you look in the packet, there's on the scales that are there should be a page that has math scales on them. I believe there's an algebra one and a geometry one. So when our teachers are creating the assessments for those skills, it's not so much about the number of questions that a student gets correct or incorrect, but which questions they get correct or incorrect, because the teachers will create a tiered set of questions so that they can pinpoint when a student kind of stops understanding in the complexity of the scale.
So if there was 10 questions on an exam, after like level 6 it shows that they understand proficiency to a point, and then the rest are like extra?
So for the level 4, there would be questions on the assessment that would be more challenging, that students would need to show a greater and deeper understanding of the standard with some more complicated questions, yes.
And then when they're grading it, that's turned into like, I feel based on the amount that they got right, they're proficient, or after that it ends.
So for a particular assignment, or if there's like you were saying, a test or a quiz. So first of all, there's a team, right? So if we're both teaching Math 8, we would sit down together and look at the student work together so that we made sure that we were using that scale in a similar way and scoring and calibrating so that we were sure about which answers would show us what level the students were at. And then it kind of depends where you are in the unit and what the results tell the teacher. If the results of that particular assessment tell the teacher that more time needs to be spent for this group of students on this particular part of it, then there's some reteaching that needs to happen. Or, wow, they got this much sooner than we expected. We can move on to this next content sooner.
I see, Jen, you have just a couple slides left. I want to kick it over to you to finish up, and then
Okay.
we'll come back to the board for more questions.
So my student is completing all of their assignments and keeping up. It still has only a 2. How do I know if they're on track? And this is one that we've been getting a lot of feedback on, and we're working on figuring out how to do better. So when we're looking at these longer term skills, particularly in English language arts, they're working on being strong writers for the entire year, really to get to the level of what grade level standard is expected. So it's likely that they will not reach those level 3 or 4s until we're about the time of year that we're in now. And that the grades are really just a snapshot of where students are at a particular point in time compared to the standard. And that these grades, it's the most recent ones, the ones that they have at the end of the year, that will count toward credit. So we heard a lot of concerns related to this question in particular tonight. How will my student distinguish themselves for college admission? Really, we as an institution, but also I think as a community, can work to encourage students to strive for those 4s. And I know that as an institution, we can work better to make sure that all students know exactly what they need to do to earn a 4. I've heard that feedback. And that colleges are looking for students who enroll in challenging coursework. So really pressing students to take the most rigorous coursework that they are interested in to meet their goals. Often, especially 9th and 10th grade students, when you're trying to encourage them to take challenging coursework, they push back a little bit because they're adolescents. So really we can support them to make those choices. The transcript, we were really intentional with its design, and the features that are on there are ways that a student can distinguish themselves, whether it's that cumulative proficiency average, the honors credential, or the activities that are listed on the right-hand side. And then at graduation, we will be honoring students. We have an honors, high honors, and highest honors based on that cumulative proficiency level. So some of the things that we know that we need to improve and work on, we know that the communication with families needs to be better. And there are lots of different aspects of that we can improve, whether it's the overall communication from the school or the individual communication between teachers and families, and also the technology we use to communicate. We know we need to revisit and revise the habits of work to better reflect student skills and progress, that we need to better coordinate the grading practices, even though now we have consistent expectations. We are hearing that it's not being followed consistently, so we know we need to work on that, and also the piece about the 4s, which I just mentioned, and that we can improve the report card to make it easier to understand. And that we know also that families are concerned about their students being prepared for high pressure situations that they might find in college or the workforce around testing and deadlines, so we can work to improve those, practicing those situations in high school. So the main resource that we used to create the kind of rollout and implementation is this book On Your Mark by Tom Missisquoi. And then some of the other experts that we consulted or attended their training or read their work are listed above, and there's also some relatively local people listed up there. And I had a chance to receive information from the St. Michael's College admission staff as well, to really hear about what they're looking for when they are reviewing student applications. I think that's it.
Do you want to share some of the next steps that you have for coming out of the meetings that we've had?
Sure, I think that in hearing the feedback from last week and some of the questions even here tonight, we know that we need to kind of gather a team to talk about what those next steps are going to be. We have a faculty meeting tomorrow. We're going to make sure to make it very clear that opportunities need to be available for all students to earn 4. Going forward for the rest of the year, we've heard that piece of feedback very clearly, and that I think looking toward what other schools in the region are doing by pulling their school profiles and getting kind of more information about how other schools are reporting in a proficiency-based way.
You know, Terry, I cut off Rennick when
Okay.
he was asking the question. You're all good? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
All right, go ahead, Terry.
I just wanted to clarify something because I just realized what I said and about kids having trouble getting to, and I didn't mean that in terms when I said that there's going to be a lot of kids who won't become proficient, so what are they going to do, stay in school? I just meant that different kids have different motivations. And I know as teachers sometimes say this person doesn't want to do it. So I guess they could still, like, if they're not motivated to excel in algebra, let's say, or even be a proficient, but they are motivated by another course. So it's still kind of the same thing. You have to be proficient in everything to be able to move on to the next grade?
It really depends on the course and whether it's a required course. I think, again, this is another place where the realities of proficiency-based graduation requirements and personalized learning, there's a little bit of tension there. When Act 77 was originally crafted, the intent was, I think, to create these flexible systems where a student could demonstrate their knowledge of algebra in a completely different setting than the algebra class. The reality of making those opportunities happen is very challenging, especially when you need highly qualified instructors to provide that instruction. And I also think that competency-based or proficiency-based learning is a very nice ideal that doesn't necessarily play nicely with traditional grade levels, the way that work credit bearing systems that we've had historically.
Which I do understand about being cultural change, but sometimes certain things. I would make a recommendation. I do know Megan Conley, who used to be on our board, is an admissions officer at St. Michael's, and she has volunteered to help with anything that she can. So you might want to put her on the committee.
Thank you.
Also, if it helps, I know the admissions person at BBM, so if you want that contact information too.
Thank you.
So I was just gonna ask, because I'm just trying to understand it too. So I'm assuming that the point of the curriculum-based learning was to have more students pass, right? Or to understand what they're learning and therefore be more successful. So is there a way for us to, given this is the first senior class, to come back and measure and reevaluate what are the outcomes?
Right.
Whether they're better, the same, worse, is this curriculum an ongoing thing that we're gonna evaluate and tweak and change, or is it just this is how it is and then we're gonna see how it goes for X amount of time?
That's a really good question. So I think that I think proficiency-based grading works within the board's greater goal of high academic achievement for all students, right? This is a system that we can use to ensure at the secondary level that all students are achieving at high levels. And so I think that, I'm sorry, now I forgot the first part of your question, I apologize.
No, I'm just trying to understand are we continually tweaking it in terms of some of the things can it become more granular? Is there a way to better translate it to a readable transcript for college? Is it one of those things where this is iteration 2 of 3.5 that we may get to? Or is it this is something we implemented and it's just trying to figure it out?
We're definitely looking for feedback and to try to make a better experience for students and families going forward. I would say that this is the first graduating class. So the iteration of the transcript is the first one, but in terms of the teaching and instructional practices, we are 5 years in with those. So we have been making changes and I would argue improvements over that time to try to make the grading practices that support the learning better. But in terms of the transcript, absolutely we can be looking for making.
And your question about curriculum review in general, teachers, coaches, curriculum director, administrators consistently review the curriculum. It's always ongoing. So the identification of which proficiencies are being assessed are reviewed every year. We have conversations, are they the right proficiencies? So that work is happening with teachers and administration continuously.
John, you had something?
I have a question. I might even have a statement, but I think I heard here tonight that some teachers don't give 4s. That takes me back about 50 years ago when I was teaching math, and I had about 100 kids, and maybe gave 3 A's, and some wonderful young students who were used to getting straight A's in elementary school and junior high. So, but there has to be a system. So I guess my question is this: who is responsible for monitoring? I'm going to call them grades, but push your numbers. Happens because it seemed to me that, and I don't think I was one of those teachers, but I've known some over the years who nobody's going to get an A in my class first Bible period. Well, that's not right if the student knows it. But it has to be monitored. So I guess my question, I'll get to it, is who's monitoring that in the high school so that we know if some teacher says, nobody's going to get an A in my history class, but next door they're doing the same thing, and that teacher says, hey, I got 20 kids that deserve an A, I'm going to give them an A.
So, I mean, the short answer is should be me, right? That's me. I understand that, and I will say that I was frustrated and concerned to hear that feedback from the community as well, because that was not our intent, and we can do a better job of monitoring that and making sure that it's clear to teachers what the expectation is.
It may be your responsibility, as a school board member, I'm going to say it may be your responsibility to do it, but it might be somebody at a different level. It's responsibility to just sit down and have a conversation with that teacher. So I guess that's enough on that topic. And my second one was, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I think the gentleman brought it to my attention in the letter the other day, but there's no such thing as a 3.3 or a 3.7, right?
We use whole number scoring.
I would love to have a debate after being in education for about 60 years about not only the value of that, but what it does to encourage people to do better. But that's not for tonight's meeting. So thank you.
Steve has a comment online.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I've been off mute a couple of times, and I just have to bring it up. And I think I'm tagging on what Don just said about the letter that we received. I have to say that I agree with that letter quite a bit. I've had troubles for the last few years in my own daughter's education and her report cards, and the scaling system or the scoring system, whatever you want to call it. I just don't understand it. I don't understand where she falls as far as good, bad, or ugly. I don't know. So I just, the presentation tonight was nice, and I appreciate that, but I think we need to do something a little bit more about the future stuff. The college standards and what they're looking for, I think we need to focus a little bit more on that. Just my say.
Steve, any other board members?
I'd like to make one comment that I should have made at the beginning of that. I've worked with this lady for about 10 years. In my idea, she's probably the highest quality people I've worked with in the last 50 years. So I'm not pointing or criticizing you, Mr. Correa.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not either, Don. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
I just want to be on the record that she's done some amazing stuff in this job at MVU.
I get it, but it's really sometimes hard to understand when you're.
It can't get better.
Sarah?
I'm sorry, I just said that. I agree. I think Jen's whatever, but we're not talking about that, in my opinion, here. We're talking more about these kids that are graduating in the schools and what can we do? Because that one makes me feel really bad. That there's kids that, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's, can't imagine there isn't something to it, but I don't know what I don't know. I think there's gotta be something here. I'm not saying that everybody would have gotten into their best school and everybody would have gotten merit scholarships, because the other way it was really hard too. So I just though think that I do feel bad, because it sounds like this. I can imagine. I remember Megan saying it's hard. She's not looking forward to it as when this starts to happen. And so with other people she talks to, so I don't know if there's anything we can do anymore about this year, because I know that you're committed to doing something what's best for all the kids. I just think this one crept up on us between everything that's been going on. And not crept up, you've been doing it for years. But I mean, but when it push comes to shove with the graduating class, everything's been good, improving everything else, but then maybe the factor that wasn't really able for us to control is the college admissions.
And I will say that I spoke with the school counselors last week, and I don't have information about merit aid, and I can see if we have that. I don't know if we've traditionally collected that information. We can start collecting that information. By and large, our students are getting into the schools, and I know that that's not all that families are concerned about, but students are getting into the schools that they want to get into for the most part. I know that we have an exception in this room, but I have not heard of other cases where students haven't been getting in.
So I would comment on when this first came up, I started asking if parents graduating seniors this year, and I would say more. I asked them, do you think Proficiency has hurt or helped your student? And most say neither. And most that I know got into all the schools they wanted to. And also they've gotten merit scholarships. So this is a really tough one for me because I don't know if we're totally offline or if we're online or if we're where we should be. I do know from my research of looking at school profiles all over the state, we're a little bit different. And that kind of concerns me. Like, why are we different? I don't think we're drastically different, but I looked at schools that I think are comparable to us. And the school profiles are great because I didn't even know they really existed, but you can Google school profile Virgins and you can pull up their school profile and look. So I think we're close. I just think we need to continuously try to improve. Mm-hmm. I think this was a first go at this transcript, and I think we've got to take the feedback, which is great, from the community to try to make it a little better. And it doesn't help that the state is all over the map.
Yeah.
That doesn't help anything, but I frequently benchmark in everything that I look at as a school board member. When I get a budget, what's everybody else at? That's what I probably drive Laura and Julie nuts with that because that's what I want to know. I want to know what other schools around us. I don't think we should be other schools, but I don't think we should be totally different from other schools. So my comment on the whole issue is it's very complex. It's not as easy as, and as a board member, it's very tough because you're hearing all different angles. But I've heard some success stories from seniors that I think were probably, they surprised me, the schools they got in and the merit they got. I think it surprised themselves too. So, and I'm going to go through this next year with my senior, and I'm kind of both terrified and I'm not enjoying the ride. I wish I could enjoy it, but I'm more terrified of what's going to happen. So anyway, that's my feedback. I'm convinced you are all committed to making it better. But I think the community wants to see something. I don't know what the time frame is, but I think it makes sense at the beginning of the school year. So my thought would be is if we're going to make some tweaks and changes that they can be in place by the start of the next school year. That's a big ask. But so that's my feedback for right
now. Thanks, Jen, for all that. You know, I wrote down a bunch of questions I had, and you addressed pretty much all of them here. So, thank you. I will say, you know, the one piece of this, Terry, talk about the goals committee agenda you're working on. it sounds like the impact of all of this really is to put a lot of kids in that 3 category. And we just looked at a whole bunch of STAR 360 scores, which indicated there probably are a lot of kids that wouldn't earn that 3 based on the state standards. And so I'd love for us to put those 2 bell curves on top of each other and just to really help calibrate and make sure that we our standards are in line with what the state standards are. So I know we've got measures to talk about and goals coming up. So I guess in terms of next steps, so we I'm kind of in line with your thinking. I guess I'd like to get this on a agenda again. We've got a faculty meeting tomorrow, but I know you're not going to be ready for next month. So what do you? I don't know if you guys know what a reasonable timeline would be now, or if you want to just do that offline later. But my hope is in the next few 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever's reasonable, to have another update on this, so we can talk about what you guys have accomplished.
Absolutely. I don't know that I have a precise timeline. I know that the community group on Wednesday asked to meet again before the end of the school year, so we'll strive to make that happen. And I know that I want to debrief with my team after both meetings and kind of figure out what our next steps will be from there.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Would it be fair to ask that maybe our first board meeting in August, when we have meetings, whether you come between now and then, certainly is an option. But by the first meeting in August, we have pretty much clarity of what it's going to look like next
We'll
year.
certainly have to know by August what changes we
Whoever keeps agendas, is Kara on tonight? Okay. But, and I'm not saying that that's the first time you should do it, I'm just saying that's a benchmark for me when school year started. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We will now move on to the MVU administrative report.
Great. I think everybody got a copy of the MVU administrative report. State testing, spring marks the state testing season. Next week we will have the Vermont Science Assessment for both grades 8 and 11 next week. For SBAC in math and ELA in grades 9, that'll be the weeks of April 25th and May 2nd. And the SBAC for grades 7 and 8 will be the weeks of May 9th and 16th. We'll use any time in there to catch up anybody else that may have missed it. The musical is next week. They have dress rehearsal next Wednesday. The show starts, Mary Poppins will be on Thursday the 14th and 15th at 7 p.m. and on the 16th 2 and 7 p.m. So they've been working, they have put in, I just gotta say, a tremendous amount of time. It's hours and hours a night they're putting in, so it's if anybody gets an opportunity to go, it should be well worth it. Wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. High school graduation will be held on Friday, June 10th at 7 p.m. and that'll be indoors. I know it was outdoors last year, largely COVID related. We got very, very lucky in the fact that the weather cooperated with us last year. Knowing that it's early June in Vermont, not knowing if we'll have the same luck, we're hoping to move it indoors on that Friday. The same with the 8th grade celebration. That'll be on Wednesday, June 8th at 6 p.m. The problem with having it outdoors is if you do need to move it, there's so many other local ones that occur that we just can't move it and say it's going to happen the next day because it runs into other towns' graduations. So that's why we've historically tried to stick to the exact day. Last Friday, we had an in-service. Our staff wellness coordinator and others made some soups and salad for lunch. We met as a full staff to go over the thought exchange for the portrait of graduate work. And in the afternoon, faculty and staff attended some professional development strands that they had been working on, some of the cultural competencies, other strands that they've been on. We are pleased to announce that during the April vacation, we're able to have the camp again for students that may be a little behind on work. That'll be for students in grades 7 through 12 and will be the 18th to the 22nd, typically from 8 o'clock to noon. And we'll have teachers there should they need to get caught up on some work. And usually guidance counselors will be reaching out to families to make sure we coordinate that with families. And then at the end of the report, we put in the newsletter, copy for the newsletter is there. A lot of information in that this month, the April one. And then you'll also see for the upcoming events, there's quite a list of between National Honor Society inductions, Junior Honor Society inductions, National Arts Awards, or the Music Awards, and others. And we will be having 6th grade step-up day this year. That'll be on May 27th. So all the 6th graders will come up to MVU during that day to transition, which we haven't been able to do the last couple of years. So we're very excited about that.
And board members who want to go to any of those evening award ceremonies are more than welcome
Absolutely.
to attend.
Absolutely. That's why I put them on there. Yeah, to make sure you guys are aware of it.
Question about camp. I think it's great we do the camps.
Yep.
Is this voluntary or is that by invitation only?
So the way the process has been working is we ask teachers to make a referral, and then school counselors reach out to families to see if the student will attend. So we received many referrals, and not all students attend. Transportation is a struggle, and it's challenging to convince a high school student to get up to go to school to do some work during vacation.
It's still a good concept. In the last one, we provide lunch on those days.
We have not this year. Last year we were able to because of the way the Abbey was providing meals to go last year. We did not do that this year, but we can certainly look into it for
Okay, so
future
what would it
years.
take to make that happen? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hart, what are you gonna?
I could, yes. I was asked to bring to the board's attention tonight, I believe, a letter that you received from me last Monday on the 28th, as it related to the status of the high school softball program for this coming year. I think the letter was fairly self-explanatory, in which we offered an opportunity for 8th grade students to participate at the junior varsity level, and the rationale for that was pretty simple. Enrollment this year in the high school softball program was the lowest that it's ever been, to the point that it jeopardized the possibility of having a junior varsity team. The spring sports registration that took place prior to February vacation indicated to both myself and John Lumsden, and then communicating with Julie at that particular point, that we might be having a problem. When we had our preseason meeting back on March the 10th, for all interested high school players, those numbers did not increase. As a matter of fact, they actually went down. When practice began on March the 21st, the situation did not get any better. We were basically faced, we felt, with three possible choices. Based upon the numbers, which were around 21, of one having only a varsity team, that would result in players being cut from the program, which is the last thing that we want to do, especially in a time when you want to build your numbers up, because experience has demonstrated over the years, once you tell a kid that they don't belong, they're not going to come back next year. We all know the stories of the Michael Jordans of the world who got cut from their junior varsity basketball team and then turned out to be a fairly good player in his own right, but that's a once in a lifetime experience. Most of us don't see that. Another option was to have a varsity team of 11 players and a junior varsity team of 10, and hope that no one became ill, injured, or chose to leave the program. That's not realistic, especially during this time when there is still a certain amount of COVID out there that schools and programs are dealing with. And then to have both the varsity and the junior varsity team, with the junior varsity team including players from 8th grade, that would allow both teams to have numbers that would permit them to be both flexible, competitive, and sustainable for the spring. So as you saw in the letter that you were included on, every 8th grade girl who signed up for middle school softball this year were afforded the opportunity to participate in the junior varsity team. We knew that some would jump at the chance. Some responded almost, I think, sooner than the letter got sent out. Others were a little more reticent. I spoke with 7 of the 10 who indicated that they were interested. And 6 of them started with the program last week and participated in their first scrimmage this afternoon. So our junior varsity team right now will have 14 players on it. 6 of them are from the 8th grade. The varsity team will have 13 players on it. So we're up to 27 in the program. What that will mean, unfortunately, is our middle school program will now have 1 team this year, which will be a combined 7 and 8, and we're looking at approximately 14 or 15 in that program. Our situation is not unusual in the state of Vermont right now. More and more schools, whether it be declining enrollment overall, or unfortunately, I would have to say because of the pandemic of the last 2 years, spring sports in particular have taken a serious hit in terms of participation. And you know those reasons as well as I do. Programs were not offered, programs were not able to take place, kids found other things to do. And it's going to take a while to bring those numbers back. So, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Any questions or the administrators?
I want to thank Mr. Hartman for the way he handled that. As a school board member, it was nice to know that was burning out there because those are the things we hear about at the post office or whatever. My question would be, I know in some schools they've added sports each season. We have lacrosse now and things. I know we don't, but are students just not participating in sports in general? Or is it spring sports? I mean,
I think it's a moving target. I think your spring sports, in particular your traditional sports, although I will, and I'll say this, our baseball program numbers are up this year. So certainly high accolades to Coach Sargent and to his staff. I think this is a trend that has been coming for both baseball and softball. Vermont is not a very conducive state, climate-wise, for strong baseball and softball programs. You know, we play a 16-game regular season, and most schools are scrambling to get it in. And then you have a tournament the first 2 weeks of June, and then you graduate.
And I would argue that even our crossroads numbers are still low. So just participation in after-school activities is still low.
should have coached in that fall baseball.
Thank you both. We'll turn it over to Julie for superintendent updates.
So a few things that I just want to highlight. You have my written report and the report from the central office administrators. Please feel free to reach out to all of them. A few things I want to highlight. We had a Highgate Reaching New Heights. Many of you were there at that meeting, either here or in the arena. The Council on Rural Development is doing a terrific job working with the Select Board to think about what the future of Highgate will be. And one of the topics was youth education and employment, really just being concerned about our students and what is out there for them after high school. And we had folks from the tech center there, we had a lot of experts from the state come, and then there was a really wonderful community dinner, and then they had more sessions afterwards. I was just looking in preparing this, the next meeting where they will then come together and people will condense some of their thinking into some priorities, and then they come back and they do more actionable steps from there. That next meeting is actually when we're having our vote on April 26th. So I do think it will be helpful because people will be out here in Highgate Elementary building, and the vote will be taking place, Laura, at the arena, correct? So I do think that that is a positive opportunity. People in Highgate will be out and about and thinking about the community, and I think that that's, I was worried at first when I saw the dates conflicted, but I think it's actually beneficial. The other thing, it was interesting that Jim came today. We just had a meeting with the State Director of Technical Education on Friday. Jen Sorter was there. Jay, as the essential department leader of the Diversified Agriculture Program, made sure that this meeting took place and we had all the teachers from the program. We went through the standards that relate to technical education. We got clarity on what MVU is allowed to do, which is diversified agriculture, and that's it. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that we can't expand. We are, which I didn't know. I knew there had been a few other schools that still were approved to teach diversified agriculture, but MVU is the last one. All the other programs have been absorbed and adopted by their regional technical centers. So MVU is unique there. The team is going to be reviewing the proficiencies that the state has defined for what diversified agriculture curriculum and outcomes should be. They're going to be looking at the hiring that needs to take place, and yes, we will need to have an advisory committee meeting and have that advisory information go to the principal, who is ostensibly the tech director for our program. So lots on the horizon, as well as there's tech education legislation out there. Funding mechanism will be changing over the next several years. There's likely to be a lot of movement in tech education in Vermont, so that's something that we're paying close attention to. And speaking of legislation, I did want to mention the pupil weighting legislation. Don always pays close attention to that. I've been paying close attention to it. I did link a quick presentation. I had a meeting with all superintendents. Emily Kornhauser is the representative who headed up the pupil weighting study task force, and is shepherding this legislation through both Senate and House Education. This bill will pass in one form or another. There is a fundamental choice between how pupils are accounted, whether it's a weighting that's revised or whether it's essentially a cost factor, where they just give schools money based on different categories of students. They're looking very closely at those different models, and there is a transition plan so that no particular school is hit very hard one way or another. I'm going to another meeting next Monday to get more information, as this is a fast-moving bill. And I guess really that's it. I would have you review the rest of the reports and see if there are any questions that you can address either to me or any of the directors.
Any questions for Julie?
I just thought that was great to read them so much, and I love the link to the newsletter with the high school one, with the MVU one, and I just wanted, do we make it available on our website?
Yes, and I've been remiss in doing it recently. I need to get several of them to Rusty to put up there.
Okay, because I know we can see them, and I just think they're great, so.
Yeah, that is the intent to do that.
Great.
The newsletter from MVU is sent out to all families, and also I believe we had it on the website, but I would have to check.
I think it is on your
Most
website. I've
recent
looked
one.
before and it's been on there. You've linked us to there. Yeah, thank you. It's great.
So Julie, we can't, have a building, let's say we decide we wanted to take and have a building trades program. We can't build a shed for our goals and a barn
That's
for our.
different.
That's different. If we can have,
So we gotta get creative on this.
if you, and we're on camera, Don, so I'm not gonna say
That's
you
all
can
right.
flip it. Like, if you put agriculture in front of it, we can do it.
All right, we'll talk
But
about that.
there is a
later.
specific list of things that we can do. Yes, you can do some in construction if it relates to agriculture.
You answered my question, I'll talk to you.
But we can't, for example, if there's an airport jet engine program that occurs, we cannot do that. That would have to be some other iteration of regional tech center. But our kids would go, and our kids would benefit.
We'll have to talk.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. That brings us to new business. First thing on here is the ARP ESSER proposed plan review.
Okay, so I'm going to do this fairly quickly, and then we will bring it back to another meeting. Is that fair enough?
Yes, I think that would be
Because we have some other big topics today, but I'm gonna do my best to do the share my screen again. So this plan, this proposal is something that's taken a couple of years to put together based on our needs assessment, our recovery plan, work with our administrators, with our teachers, with our coaches. It's a very comprehensive plan. We talk a lot about things that we funded or plan to fund with grant money. You can see linked in here our recovery plan, our needs assessment. There's an overview of the grant financials we've spent over the past several years, as there have been many different kinds of grants that we received. This one is the biggest pot of money that schools received coming out of COVID. For us, it is just under $8 million, 20% of which needs to be spent on recovery of prevention and mitigation strategies and addressing the academic impact of what was lost during the pandemic. We have closer to half of our plan is about addressing the academic needs, the physical needs, the social emotional needs, the engagement and truancy needs of students. We also have some pieces in there, as we've all been discussing. We've been talking in facility committees for a long time about what we can do with at least about half of this money, because it's not very often that school districts are going to get a chunk of money. We can't just buy lots of iPads, right? We can't just have lots and lots of tutors and then let them go in a year. So all of these have been based on needs analysis of our students and professional learning for our teachers, and it's all geared for building capacity. And we want to do some things that are long-lasting, such as perhaps add some instructional space in our schools. So we have some space study there, and we have about $3.9 million set aside
For the construction.
for possible construction.
Like
projects.
3.2, yeah.
All 3.2. All of that is subject to multiple layers of pre-approval and approval and so forth. So this is a proposal that will be amended through the life of it. If we have a strategy here for summer program transportation and we can't find summer program transportation, then we would say, gee, what's another way in which we can spend this? So if you will see, most of the things are around summer, after school, tutoring. We've got math curriculum materials. We have a whole team of folks working with the Vermont Math Institute, and Kosha has been leading that work, Jen and her team at MVU, so that we can buy some math program materials and then give teachers the professional learning that they need to implement it, because we've identified math as a need, that we have vertical alignment needs. Literacy curriculum materials, a lot of professional learning for teachers. We really need to be looking at 3 pillars: social emotional learning, truancy and engagement, and academic growth, particularly for students who were more than typically impacted by COVID. So students who struggle even more coming out of the pandemic. So this grant was written very particularly to make sure that we are addressing the needs of those groups of students. So you will see a lot of professional learning, a lot of instructional supports. Some of the software that we've been purchasing, we talked about Freckle in one of our meetings. That is software that's aligned to our assessments in reading and math, that then will target where students are challenged and then give them the additional practice that they need to move them, so the next time they're assessed, they're doing better. Things such as that are in there. I'm looking at you, Rennick, because I'm looking at the acronym of MTSS. Multi-tiered systems of supports is something that Vermont is a structure that really needs to ensure that all students have many supports for their learning. So we're not just calling kids eligible for special education, or, you know, it has to do with students who are struggling emotionally, students who are struggling academically, it can be anything. So it's a very complex model, and COSHA has done a lot of work. We had actually a wonderful analysis of our systems of supports in all of our schools to make sure, are they adequate, are they aligned, where can we improve? We're going to continue with that work. Universal design for learning, as Jen was mentioning, instructional leadership so that our administrators are getting training in how to better evaluate and lead their buildings, screening tools, science and hands-on learning. It continues from there. Lots of tutors. So we also have, that's sort of the standard under that 20%. We also have devices to be purchased. We have some PBIS professional development, which is positive behavioral instruction and supports for students. We're looking at perhaps some outdoor classroom spaces, because again, we keep hearing about hands-on engaging learning opportunities so that students who aren't necessarily hooked by sitting in a classroom all day long and having people talk. Not that anyone talks at them, but having outdoor learning spaces. The athletic trainer position, for example, that we really needed to find during COVID, that's in this grant as well. Guidance supports, SLP services. Some of these are additional supports, some of these are positions that already exist, and we're using grant funds for those. Study hall monitor at MVU, an HHB coordinator that we brought on because we had a lot going on there. The thought exchange license, so that while we have this grant, we can continue to get input.
So the personal planning coordinator side of the budget things.
That,
Right now
it is covered right now.
It's in the budget too, though, it's a flow
But it's in
through.
the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
So that's where we are right now. We're gonna have more continued engagement opportunities. We had the thought exchange, we had pretty good participation. We had, we have to hear from very particular groups of people, down to, are you a mental health provider? Are you a medical provider? Do you work for the Office of Civil Rights? I believe we're gonna be meeting with the PAC, for the Abenaki tribe, and really see if we can sit down with folks there and get their input. So this is an ongoing process.
Alright, so we'll have that on some future agenda items.
Absolutely.
Agendas as well.
I'm gonna stop my shirt
Can we, that document we can see, right?
Absolutely,
Can you put it in the drive for this meeting?
absolutely. I
That-
didn't
that way
before
I'll-
the meeting because
Yeah, that's fine,
It-
I'll look at it
Yeah,
more.
it was in the, it was linked in the thought exchange too, so that
Oh, okay.
it was right there. So
You're sure, right?
absolutely,
I won't read it all.
it will be there.
And if it isn't on the website yet, it will be,
It will
just
be.
hasn't been
It has
posted
to be.
yet.
Sunday afternoon for snow.
Don't say snow.
I said, it does, that's what I'll read.
I'll just add that there was a requirement that this be submitted to the state along with the return to state schools and all those other links as of the end of March. And so the state has yet to give us any feedback on that.
Don't hold your
I never do.
Alright, we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is the transportation bid award. We talked about finding for executive session to talk about negotiating some of these, I think. In open session, Laura, would you like to present the bids? Or
Do you want me to share? So it can
Yes.
be,
We definitely rushed through that first presentation because I know we have a lot to talk about with the transportation bid.
So in the drive, there's two documents, just so you're aware, it's kind of, yeah, I can try. Two ways of looking at the bids as they were received. This one. I don't know how much bigger I can make it. This one is more just focused on our current bids in the first column with M&C and Grand Avenue, and then we look at the bids received from the two vendors. This is just for school transportation of students. It does include vocational as well, but this is just students to and from school. The other document that I have in the drive is more of a financial outlook. Actually, other way around, sorry, this one is just the schools, the other one has the vocational and the field trip transportation and things like that, co-curricular, extracurricular. But let me just back up for a minute, just for people that might be listening. We did launch the transportation RFP on March 11th. We had those due back on April Fool's Day, April 1st. We had two vendors, our current two vendors, M&C Transportation and Grand Avenue or Terracel Transit, attend the pre-bid conference that was required as well. We knew this would be an undesirable time to go out to bid for transportation. And I believe when you review the results and the bids that we received from those two vendors, you will understand even more why that is the case. So we did receive a bid from M&C Transportation. They were our current vendor for Highgate and Franklin, as well as the Highgate and Franklin MVU students, as well as a lot of co-curricular. They have only submitted a bid for Franklin School this time. The increase is about 43% here, or $67,000 on the school transportation, student transportation to and from school side. We also received a bid from Terracel Transit for Highgate, Swanton, and MVU, and that includes the buses that we send to Alberg and Sheldon to pick up students. This would be a change for Highgate. Over last year, it's representing about a 41% increase. And then Swanton, Alberg, and Sheldon buses in the MVU portion, that's about a 5 to 7% increase that we're seeing in those costs. I would like to point out that M&C did not include, I should say there were parameters in which we asked them to bid. There were very clear bid forms that were provided. We asked them to include information about what fuel cost parameter they were using when creating their bid, and then also include a fuel cap that had been $4. Some of the vendors had completed that and some did not, but in M&C, they did let me know at the bid opening that they were not going to have a fuel clause, so there's no cap, basically. I do not have the information as to what they utilized to provide us the bid that they provided, but they did let me know that there would not be a fuel cap, so if the fuel price raises over $4, they would not invoice us. If it raised significantly more than that, or less than that, we wouldn't get reimbursed anything either. The fuel cap for Terracel or Grand Avenue is the $4, and that's the price they use to create their bid as well. We did structure the RFP per the request of the board in such a way that we could award anywhere from 1 to 3 years, so 1, 2, or 3 years. So that's kind of the overview.
So when the people in Franklin, they're not gonna bid, they don't bid for any of the high school students here.
M&C bid for Franklin, as well as bringing the Franklin students to and from MVU.
Yes, it would.
And they also bid on athletic and field trips for those students as well.
What was that kind of increase? What would you, I wanna say, what was the increase on that?
Just the Franklin portion?
No, the field trips and the athletic trips.
They went from, we changed the structure a little bit because what we tried to, in our bid form, we tried to gain consistency and make it a per run or per day cost, but that we didn't necessarily get the results that way. And so they are going from $1.70 a mile plus $16.50 an hour wait time. So when they're sitting and waiting for the students, to $1.85 a mile and $19 an hour. Oh, that's current, sorry. Then they're going to $75 an hour is what they would charge, a flat $75 an hour rate. They provided, I'm a little bit confused about some of the information because again, the bid forms were not filled out completely. So it appears to me that the field trip cost for Franklin would be $75 an hour consistently over 3 years, but for MVU, it would be $75, then $78.75, and then $82.68, so there was an increase each year.
So there's some wait, there's no such thing as wait time.
We asked them to structure it differently. And
This is when we start, this is what we.
what we're really looking for is for them to all, if we had 2 vendors, for them to be the same, so we could compare. Some do prefer to do it differently.
Have you talked with other business managers in the state, are they running up against the same type of issues?
I don't know anyone that has received their bids yet that I've talked to. Everyone had the same concerns about, rising fuel costs and labor shortages, which, is why we included the 2 pieces around what are you basing your bid on as far as a fuel cost, and then the fuel cap of $4, because there's some protection there for both parties. Was I expecting the increases that we saw? I don't think anyone was.
So this is an executive session.
So, to talk about any strategies, negotiation strategies we might want to undertake, but then when we come out, we can take action if we choose. All right, any last questions? Okay, we'll move on to the budget marketing discussion.
Well, one thing that occurred to me while Dan was speaking is that the MVU musical is next week. And I think one of the things that we have just talked about briefly are how can we get out to schools? And we have some ideas around that, but if we have our 1-pager, I think having that out at the musical where family members can come and pick that up. Not that we necessarily need somebody sitting there interrupting Mary Poppins to talk about the school budget. But as a lot of people will come through in those couple of days, it'd be great to have some of those flyers there.
Yeah, I'll get it up, that's fine. Yep.
I did put a draft 1-pager in another one. We did send one out originally with our first vote. I've redone that now. This is just a draft. I'm still working on it. I'm trying to work within parameters of also a every door delivery of mail that we could do at a lower rate and reach every single community member in all 3 towns. So it does look a little different because I'm trying to use it for both purposes. But if anyone has feedback, please send it my way.
Do you want me to share that up on the screen, Laura?
When you get the 1-pager, do you want to send that to me?
I will,
Okay.
yeah.
So Laura has actually been learning a great deal about post offices. If you fold it over, it's 40 cents a piece. But if it's flat like this, it's how much?
19 or 20 cents.
19 or 20 cents. So we're going with flat. And, but then of course, everything has to fit in particular places. But I do think that we need that multi-pronged approach. Some people are gonna want something that they get in the mail and they look at and they see a 1-pager. We will see about getting something in the messenger again in terms of an insert so that the message is controlled. But other people, they like the mail piece. We also will do, of course, the Facebook website, and we will do Front Porch Forum, and we will use social media, and we will probably use a boost feature to get that further out. But the conversations we had last time were about what can we do to sit in each community and talk to people who just have questions. And so Devin and I had spoken, and I don't know if you want to go from there about what your thoughts were, because I think they're pretty good.
Sure. So I know the group talked about during the last meeting. The group talked about doing some informational sessions in the 3 individual towns, like we used to do when we were doing school budgets on town meeting day. I think that was a good idea, and so we have our next board meeting is scheduled for next week. So the thought was to have some folks come early, so we do need to talk about locations at the end of this, but
some folks come early, maybe 3 or 4 people, to be available for questions, have a brief presentation for any community members who want to come and see that. And then use those next 2 days and ask the Board Goals Committee and the Facilities Committee to each take one of those 2 nights and hold a similar session in the other 2 towns, so that we do have one informational session that's real informal, just come in and ask questions, a real brief presentation, but really just be there to answer some of the questions and have conversations with any community members. So.
Justina sent us some dates that there were activities going on in Swanton. I'm sorry, I forgot about this until a little while ago. I forget what dates there were. One was bigger than the other, and I don't have the password to get on here.
But I will, I'm meeting with them tomorrow, so we can also ask the principals tomorrow. So we do, a little time in Franklin, a little time in Highgate, a little time in Swanton. Come, tell us what you're thinking, what questions you have. So that's a piece to do. But then, are there some events, right?
Yeah.
So the musical, something going on in Swanton, something going on in Highgate. Can we have even just, please have these 1-pagers out. Please, a sign that says, remember to vote. If you want an absentee ballot, please contact your town clerk. Those kinds of things that we can do.
Swanton has something next week in Justina's.
That's what Justina was
A
telling us.
family night.
Yeah.
They have their math and literacy night.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
On the 11th.
When is it, Kosha?
The 11th.
The 11th, so that's Monday night.
Oh.
Yeah, so we'd be probably looking at the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Oh, I thought you said a different night.
Was it Thursday?
I think it was.
It may be next Thursday.
There were 2 days she gave us. She thought one would be bigger than the others.
On the
14th.
12th, they have their title family game night, and the Thursday, the 14th.
The
Yeah.
14th.
That's the 14th.
So Swanton on the 13th as well.
14th.
Because the family engagement
Oh, we're gonna do
night
it the same
is
night,
a
okay.
have it the same night, because you're gonna have people
Right.
there.
People will come, as opposed to saying, oh, come hear
Yeah.
us.
Try for Swanton.
Yeah, they're not.
And then 12th and 13th will, I guess, depend on where we hold our meeting on the 12th, so that's on our agenda at the end. Laura, one quick thought, I'm just seeing that 1-pager. I think people would love to see the tax rate on that first page instead of a list of all our names.
I was thinking the same thing.
No,
Or unless
that's
that's
just
not.
it has to be 1 page, so it can be double-sided, so I have to put the sender information somewhere, so that's just gonna be behind, like, do you mean the second page?
Well, this first page just has like.
So it's not a first page, though, it's gonna be the back of the flyer.
That's the back,
Yes,
that's the front.
yes,
Okay.
well, back, front, depends on
Whichever.
how
I was
it
just gonna
is.
say.
Sure.
Although I'll tell you, the United States Postal Service has a very strong opinion about that. But yes, send me anything that's missing from that other page, but the other side has to be kind of the way that I have it. The very simple page can't have a lot on it because it has to have the mail delivery, postal, every address, and our sender information, and not a whole lot else.
We could probably shrink the font size for our names and just put a quick little your taxes are going down table on there. So they don't even
I
have
can
to.
see if I can put more data on there, yeah.
Alright,
Okay.
that's where I'm headed.
As long as it's not, what I'm hearing is as long as it's not too visually interesting, right? Because the scanning machines.
It's like I can,
They don't-
I don't even wanna try to explain it, so my intent is to bring them this copy after hours on the phone with them and say, is this acceptable or not, tell me what I need to do.
Watch the numbers in the bottom. I got 100 things right now.
Hello?
Yes, Steve.
Hello? Hey, Steve, yeah. The guy at the post office in St. Albans, his name is Ross. He is the bulk mailing guru. And he could to the Highgate Center area and get those out for you a little better. He might be somebody to talk to make it the easiest.
Good to know.
Ross.
That's last
You
week.
don't take anything right now.
His last name is Hillsopple. Hillsopple. No idea where he's from, but he's a nice guy named Ross.
Sounds good.
There you go. That's
Something like
Alright, any other thoughts, comments?
So my question is that good to go, that PDF? Cause I'd like to start sharing it with people, but I don't wanna do it if we're not.
If it's not ready.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's not quite
No
ready.
one else has looked at it to tell me if I misspelled anything or,
Okay.
so by tomorrow?
Well, yeah, that's fine. I'd like to know when it's done, cause I wanna start
Okay,
sharing.
Yeah.
But I don't wanna share it before it's done.
sure.
So if anyone has feedback for Laura, tonight and early tomorrow would be the time to get it to her, so she can make last minute changes.
So, Mr. Chairman, who's gonna decide whether facilities committee's gonna go, or the goals committee's gonna go? Is that next on your agenda?
Well, yeah, it is now.
Let's talk right now.
Alright, so, our next meeting, who would like to come early, on the 12th to hold one of these? I'm happy to do that if
We're
anyone,
gonna be here in Highgate,
well,
when we do.
that's
We had talked about it being in Franklin at the last board meeting, but it wasn't decided.
okay.
Right, we did, but there was, Peter, you there? There was some reason you said to come to Franklin, or don't come to Franklin.
I just didn't want to come to Franklin tonight because I'm not there.
So it's tonight then, okay, so we know.
Yeah, and I'll do whatever you need unless you've got other volunteers.
Well, yeah, let's talk about the location next meeting first, I guess, to decide that. My proposal that I had sent out was to rotate the 4 schools, so each month we'd have both our meetings in the same location, so that would put us back here in Highgate next time around, and then
It's a great suggestion, but I didn't go over.
sounded like Don didn't like it, he hardly presented it to you.
I presented it, but I thought it was a bad idea.
Alright, fair enough.
If you're the chair, you can say things. That'll keep you coming to these meetings very late. No, Peter said that he's right, he was gonna be gone and he didn't want to be here tonight.
Okay, so your preference would be to rotate our 4 meetings, just 1, 2, 3, 4, or?
No, I just wanted to get through this budget presentation to as many places as possible.
Gotcha,
That was
gotcha.
my agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think if I recall the conversation at the last meeting, it was really between now and the end of June
Yeah.
to get to each school, and then next year, perhaps do the 1 month in a place.
Okay.
Potentially,
I like that
characterizing
idea,
that.
1 month.
Okay, so we've already identified the 14th as a good chance for Swanton, so I guess that leaves next meeting, leaves Franklin for the site of next week's meeting, and then on the 13th, we'd be looking for a group to be back here in Highgate. So Terry,
It's gonna be the 13th.
so we'll do the 13th and the 12th, 13th, 14th, so will be the 3 budget informational meetings. So
Which one of those is
Well,
gonna be
they're
here?
not the budget.
sorry, the non-information meetings, yes, the terminology is important here. This is just an
Questions
opportunity.
about
Questions, yes, general question and answer session for community members to, and a few board members.
Which one of those times is gonna be a board meeting?
The
The
12th
12th
is
would be a
is
board meeting at 6:30, but we'll do budget questions beforehand, and that sounds like that would be Franklin.
Yeah.
It sounds like the 13th would be budget questions here in Highgate. I will have to ask Yeshua about the space, but I assume the library would be available, but I'll find out if it's not. And then Swanton on the 14th, and I will talk tomorrow with leadership there to find out what space.
So
So the time would probably be, well, for the 12th one would be 5:30? Because it would be before the board
be
meeting?
before, we need full hour, 45.
Yeah, I just,
I think 6 is good.
6 is good.
so 6 for all of them, we think?
Well, it depends on what the others are, or what else is going on with the
I
others.
got scrimmage, I wanna go to 12.
Oh, do I as well?
So you may not be volunteering for 6 o'clock on the 12th?
I'd like to stay away from the 12th. Well, it doesn't matter, it'll be over by 6.
Toby, those are genuine questions. That's the one that my kid's on.
No. It's a different one.
Depends when the sun sets, Toby.
That's true.
It was nice when we went alphabetical. I mean, it was easy to keep track of.
We'll get back to that methodology, Steve, for sure. In one form or another.
So it would seem that Peter's on the facility committee, and I am, so why don't we go to Franklin?
Well, I was gonna ask the committees to do the 13th and 14th, those extra ones,
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But you can still do Franklin as well if you like. That one's just kind of a volunteer.
Come early, we're gonna be there anyway.
The Swan one is, I can do the Swan one. 14.
Okay.
But the time, you're gonna get back to us.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to do this one too, since I live there.
Just keep next week.
Instead, I know you were talking about the groups doing it, but I'm okay.
That's okay. If it's easier to just do.
It was a great
members who
idea.
can make it, then that's fine too. I was just hoping to not add extra meetings to the committee members, but that's fine. We don't. It sounds like we're just
Divvying them up.
at random here. So whatever your preference is. So I'll take the 12th and the 13th. I have other obligations on the 14th.
So who's going to Swanton besides Toby?
Terry is.
Want to done?
Steve and Peter, do you guys have any? And Joanne, do you have any thoughts?
I can do the 12th. I can do anyone. It doesn't matter, but I can go to Franklin early.
Well, we have at least two members for each, so if we can get a third, it'd be great, but I think we have a minimum.
I'll be enough like Franklin. We'll see.
Do we only have one person in Highgate?
We have Highgate, right now we have myself and Rennet.
Oh, okay.
Alright, well, we'll work with that for now. If anybody would like to jump into any of those dates, just shoot me or Julie an email. Or, doesn't really matter to add people unless we had too many. You probably want people to know about it anyway, so.
Right.
You just mentioned the actual info meeting too,
Sure, the actual info meeting is on
the 25th.
25th of April, which is the Monday following school vacation. That is scheduled for 7 o'clock at MVU. You want to ask?
25th. I would just like to know if people are planning to attend or the presentation was also shared in the drive. If anyone has feedback, I just tailored and kind of made it more condensed and changed numbers. So if anyone has feedback or anything, I know we've talked about some things, Devin.
Yeah.
Please send it my way so I can update it.
All right. So info meeting April 25th at MVU, 7 o'clock. April 26th, the next day is the date of the vote.
I'm not sure I can make that meeting.
I'll probably be there.
I might be hands up on babysitting.
Kevin?
Yep, here.
On that meeting for the budget meeting on the 25th that we're gonna have, I'm just wondering, and I know Laura's put a lot of work into all that stuff, but I'm just wondering if we should condense it. A lot of the information we went over last time, I don't know if we really need to go over all that information again, what schools and all that. I'm wondering if we should be more concise and talk about the differences between the two budgets and what we did, and I don't think we need a lot of information. We haven't had a lot of people. Hopefully we get more. I think they're just looking for what's different.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Any other questions, comments, budget marketing discussion? Alright, seeing none, so yeah, just get any feedback on any of it, the one pager or the presentation, over to Laura so those can be incorporated. Alright, we're on to old business, we will do, check warrants.
On the finance committee.
I'm Steve usually.
Yeah, you wanna be on Steve?
I'm here.
Okay.
You will read the warrants.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You can
I always have to make sure. Thank you, Laura. Right now we have accounts payable at $1,137,814.49. Payroll checks, 47,090.65. Payroll disbursements, 1,522,778.58. And payroll deductions totaling 582,008.70. Total comes to 3,289,692.42.
Alright, thanks Steve, do I have a motion to accept the check warrants as read? Terry's the first, do I have a second? Rex the second. Alright, any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor of approving the check warrants as read, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Steve, Steve, I didn't catch your vote, you froze on us there for a second.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Alright, thank you. Alright, and the motion carries 8-0.
Yeah, who made the motion?
Terry.
Terry, yeah.
Terry.
Alright, and now we have adoption of the E1 Title I Part A LEA Parent and Family Engagement Policy.
Peter, I got your input about putting local education authority in there before LEA. The feds love to say LEA and SEA and all of that, and we get so used to it. So thank you for that. Kosha, I don't know if you want to just speak to the highlights of it. You had a first reading. It's been a year-long process of working with each of the schools to make sure that we're in compliance with this federally mandated, and the state has now given us this new template that we need to follow. And you've done remarkable work shepherding everybody through it.
Yeah, this year this was a new requirement as we are getting Title I federal grant money, and parent and family engagement is considered a very important component of any kind of Title I program. So we did have family engagement going on, but now we are required to have a district level policy which outlines how we are going to do it, what actions we're going to take, what each of the schools are going to do to reach out and collaborate with parents as important partners in their child's education. So basically, I met with each school team and got from them what they're doing and what they want to do as far as engaging parents and families, and then consolidated it into the district policy. What we are also required to do is, other than this district policy, which we had a definite template that we had to fill out, we also have to create a school level procedure for each school. So here's the district policy, but then each school has to define what they are going to do specifically to engage parents and families. So we started with what is each school wanting to do, and then developed it into the school level policy. They also have other things in there. For example, what are you going to do when you have students who are English language learners, and how are you going to provide materials to families who need translation services and things like that. So they want to make sure that parents are aware of what the Title I program is in the school, what are their rights as Title I parents, and then for schools to really be able to use different methods of reaching out to families. So, some people prefer using social media. And the elementary schools, they use Class Dojo and they use Seesaw to push out information. MVU has a newsletter. So using multiple ways to reach out to families so that they're getting the information that they need. And also providing multiple opportunities for families to participate in their child's education. So that's what the policy is. And we did the first reading, and it's basically following the federal template in terms of what we want to do. So we've had, for example, we have a Title I annual meeting every year. We want to expand on that. And one of the things Yeshua and Chris have both done at Swanton and Highgate is to start attending PTO meetings. So the principals are getting involved with parents that way, because it's always hard to have parents come for additional meetings. So since the PTO is meeting anyway, they went in before the PTO meeting to say, hey, we want to create this school level procedure. We want you to help us to form a homeschool compact. And Joyce did too. She reached out to families to say, here's our homeschool compact. Can you give us feedback? And the homeschool compact basically has what are the responsibilities of students, teachers, and families to make sure that all students are learning. So basically we've had the school level, we'll have the district level policy, we'll have school level procedures, and then we have a homeschool compact for each of our 4 schools.
One of the things that's important to know that when a motion is made to adopt, we need to make it clear that we are removing our current E1 Title I parent involvement policy that is based on a previous model that doesn't meet these requirements. So we'd be rescinding one and adopting that.
Yeah, and this policy also has to be annually reviewed, so it's not like set in stone. We'll be reviewing it every year to say we got more feedback from parents or input, and we want to modify or tweak or change things. So there will be an annual review.
And I put the date for the annual review on this for next October.
Do you get much parental feedback?
So the most feedback that parents give is usually during parent conferences when they're meeting with their child's teacher to be able to give, hey, we want more of this. We have this year, as I said, both Yeshua and Chris have been attending PTO meetings, so they've been able to get more feedback on that. Some people prefer where the homeschool compact is put on the website, and then they send out a Google form, and so if parents can't come into the building, they can still provide feedback. So we are trying to reach as many parents through different means as possible. Do we want more parents to give feedback? Absolutely. And so we appreciate when parents come in and say, hey, can you tell us more about this or more about that? And the last 2 years have definitely been challenging in terms of not being able to meet in person. But we are hoping that after next year, we get more parents to come in and give us feedback.
All right, so at this time, I will accept a motion to rescind our current Code E1 Title I Part A Parent and Family Engagement Policy and adopt this E1 Title I Part A Parent and Family Engagement Policy as read.
I'll move that.
Dawn is the first. The second. Terry's the second. Any discussion?
We don't need 2 readings of this motion, no?
It's been warned for more than 10 days. We've had a first reading of it on the 22nd.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Steve, you froze up again on me.
I'm fine.
Yes, okay, sorry, just didn't get that. So, motion carries 8-0. All right. Alright, and now, we have capital project updates. Laura?
Sure, so Eric Lafayette from EEI provided a couple brief updates that I added that document into the drive. But basically the Highgate, there's been a lot of behind the scenes work. I can tell you that your facility directors have been communicating very closely with this company, and a lot has been happening, a lot of moving parts. But Highgate HVAC upgrade project will be kicked off during April break. They've been starting some prep here and are doing as much as they can to move that project along as quickly as possible, knowing that the summer is a very tight timeline for that amount of work. But they're still very optimistic that will be possible. Franklin Design, that will be starting a program review in the next couple of weeks. We did include the Franklin Design funding in that forward-facing plan that we went to the AOE for the Art Esser funding as well. But they'll be working closely with the Franklin staff to identify the needs of the schools and priorities, and that will be happening over the course of a few months. The Swanton and Franklin controls, as well as the Franklin insulation, subcontracts have been issued and materials have been ordered for those. That work will be starting some over April break as well. The MBU roof phase 1 is planned to start on June 28th. We actually just finalized that contract today. It's looking like a 6-week project, working long days with increased crew size to complete the work prior to kids coming back. But we're optimistic that that can happen as well. And then the Babcock design, honestly, is a bit just kind of on hold, waiting to get the feedback on the Franklin design with the Art Esser plan, so we know if anything has to be changed, and then we'll move forward with that as well.
Thanks, Laura. Any questions for Laura on those capital projects?
Is EEI staff enough to take all the projects that are coming through?
They just added a gentleman named, I have not met him yet.
That's okay, that's good to know that they're
John
on staff
Brown.
because,
He will be our assigned person on site in Highgate primarily at first, but then taking on the MBU as well. Eric will still be here as well, and Mike is still involved also. But yes, we have a person assigned to us now also.
Alright, thanks Laura. I'm sure we'll be looking at updates on those capital projects for a while now.
Kevin, I just have a question for Don and Peter. Is the facilities meeting anytime soon, or?
we wait to hear from Laura, she tells us.
Okay, alright, I just didn't know if there was
Probably
any.
next time.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
I haven't been asking because the budget's such a
Yeah.
priority, but we'll get there.
Alright, next item on the agenda is board goals. Remember, it says appointment, pretty consistent with how we put people on our committees. I think nomination probably would be the better one. So Rennick joined us after we created our committees and has interest in joining the board goals committee. So I guess I'd ask if anyone would be willing to nominate Rennick to join the board goals committee. Toby's the first. Terry's the second. Alright, any discussion?
It's a great committee.
All those in favor of nominating Rennick to our board goals committee, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There's Steve's hand. Alright. Motion carries 8-0. Alright, welcome aboard. Alright, and then our last item under other business is a student enrollment matter.
We have a student who has been attending MVU that now resides in another community. And the parent has asked if the student can stay at MVU. Typically, we have some of those questions answered in the executive session because we're talking particularly about students. So we may want to have that conversation in executive session. I did tell the family that the student could remain at MVU until this Friday so that they would have an answer one way or another.
Alright, so I think we have a finding for executive session to discuss the student enrollment matter. Alright. Future meeting dates and sites. So, we decided next one will be Franklin. Alright, so going beyond that now, so that, sorry, I'm gonna bring up the schedule.
two time periods to talk about, between now and June, and then a more regular permanent rotation for the new school year. So,
I did preemptively change April 12th to Franklin, just so that some people could have a heads up. But the rest of them say to be determined. It was brought up last meeting that perhaps between now and June we want to go to MVU one more time, that we want to get into the Babcock building, that we want to, try and get to all of the schools. And we have, starting with May, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings left.
One of the things I did bring up about the MVU, I found that the first meeting in June, we hear a lot of things related around the graduation and the year of high school. And if people don't care, that's fine, but I found that MVU board member really gave you a good sense of the year's coming to an end and graduation. But that's up to you. Unless we could roast Mr. Hardin too.
I'm skipping that meeting then.
You're all game that night?
I'll make one.
I'm just gonna say, but do exiting seniors have like an exit survey?
So we don't have something that we've done consistently year to year, but this year our personalized learning teacher, who's been working with grade 9 students and middle school students predominantly, has scheduled exit interviews on Fridays, and so I don't know how far along we are into that, but I can check into it.
Yeah, we were talking just today about how to gather our data for post-secondary outcomes, because we rely a lot on the VSAT survey and not a lot of kids respond to that. So, what information we can get from our seniors about, do you have a job? Do you have an apprenticeship? Are you going to college after school? What are your plans? How we collect that, what makes sense for us to do on our own. That'd be pretty interesting to have.
Something like, cause like parents at like elementary, they got like the thoughts share. We got something like that, that sent out to them, and kind of, I thought it was interesting how we could not only respond, but rate other responses.
It's more like a dialogue that way. So it might be an interesting, we should talk. Jen has an account that she does not use. So, because it's all basically been, district level things, but it would be really interesting to see if we could use it in some way to get feedback from our seniors.
I enjoy doing it that way, like that, talk to somebody.
It's either that or you do a TikTok, so.
I know Mr. Hartman would sign up to do TikTok.
He's looking for this month's challenge. I will destroy your
TikTok.
alright, well, let's bring it back here.
Thank you.
Okay, so meeting sites, Dawn, I think, listening to the last meeting, you pointed out it would be nice to have one final meeting at MVU with Mr. Hartman, so I think that's
Well, you really listened closely.
I did. So I guess I would propose then our second meeting in April be Franklin, our first meeting in May be Swanton.
Which is the third?
Yes, May 3rd.
Okay.
Our second meeting in May would be back here, Highgate, and then do both June meetings at MVU. So we got one more meeting in each of the 3 elementary schools, and then we'll just finish up in June. Finish up at MVU for June for the last 2.
So the 17th is Highgate, and then what do we don't
Yeah,
have
can we do the dates again?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, don't worry.
I've changed my dates.
Okay.
Franklin on the 12th of April.
Franklin on the 12th of April. April
May 3rd,
25th is our budget information meeting. We can't say that enough times. That'll be at MVU. May 3rd will be in Swanton.
Okay.
May 17th, Highgate.
5/17.
Highgate,
Yep, gotcha.
June 7 and June 14th at MVU. Is that what I'm hearing?
21.
No, it's the 14th. Yep. So, and that's already, I've just changed it live on the board schedule, that's up on our website. Yeah, we do retreats.
6, 7, and 14, MVU.
Yes. And then.
Sorry, I've been changing everything.
And then July we'll have just a retreat, no regular board meeting.
That's way too far for me.
Okay.
That's a whole other table.
Yeah.
All right. So let's we need that deviates, right? So we need a motion to. set
Yes,
that.
because we just agreed to do June 14th, because that's a change, that's not the third Tuesday.
Okay. So I guess I'll ask for a motion to change the board meeting date and locations as just read by Julie.
Not to interrupt you, but Bonnie just let us know that June 7th is all elementary school graduations.
Oh.
Oh, that's handy.
Do you wanna have a board meeting? She said.
Probably not.
I don't know that, but that's what she's telling me.
Why can't we go May 31st?
Yeah. Isn't that Memorial?
Okay.
No.
Serious.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
That sounds
Instead of
good.
June 7th, go May 31st, because that's still 2 weeks.
Right, I like that.
And then we would have the 14th.
Especially if you do the 14th, that would help.
All right, so, like Steve, now I gotta check out. June 7th, we changed to May 31. So we actually have 3 meetings in May.
But it's every other week.
But it's every other week, which is the important part, because it's the back-to-back is kind of hard for everyone involved. And then June 14th, which is after graduation. We'll have plenty of information about end-of-year events and things like that for May 31st.
It was good because the middle school sports awards night was on the 7th as well, just in case.
Let's see.
All right. So now we'll look for a motion for the schedule that Julie just.
I'll move that we approve the chairman's recommended date changes.
All right. A little more enthusiasm next time, Don. Is there a second?
Holy moly, I guess so.
All right, Steven's the second.
And just for discussion, I wanna go on record here that I can't make it on the 14th, because I didn't know it was gonna be on the 14th, so just saying. Okay.
All right.
Continued discussion, Devin?
Sure, why not? We've come this far.
So, I just wanna get out there that, next week is coming up quick, so those meetings next week, we really need to get advertised.
Yep.
And, I know I sent Julie an email that the town clerk in Franklin sends out, has a town, group email to send out when things are going on in town and meetings and stuff, so be nice to get that to Lisa so she could, let people in town know that we're gonna be meeting next week.
We will do that.
All right, thanks, Peter. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion carries 8-0. Locations after the July break. We haven't talked about that yet. So that was the proposal to just hold both meetings in the same school. Without, I was trying to be nice to the non-Franklin folks and keep us out of Franklin in January, December, February. So it results in August in Highgate, and then it's alphabetical from there. 2 at MVU in September, Swanton in October, Franklin in November. Highgate in December, MVU in January, Swanton February, March Franklin, April Highgate, May MVU, and June of next year in Swanton is the proposal.
I don't know if it is yet. Maybe it was last month.
I think it was last
month.
month.
I think it was, yeah.
So any Thoughts on that?
I'll be declined.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
I guess the real question is, are there any objections
Yeah,
to
any
holding
objections?
two in the same place? I know that,
That is
you
the
know,
change.
it helps us to say, oh, it's Highgate's month,
Mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to, is this the first meeting of the month
Yeah.
or the second? Are we at MVU or are we in Swanton? You know, we used to do that. There will still be special things that happen, as there always are.
All right, we don't need a motion on that, right? 'Cause it's just no date changes.
My only, and I'm not opposed to what we're saying, but I just wanna think back when we made this, the, first time we made up our current schedule, we thought it was important to be at MVU every month because, that's the middle and high school and all our kids are going there. I'm not saying we have to, I just wanted to remind people that's why we did it.
Okay, so without objection, thanks for the reminder, Peter. And I guess we'll move on. We are now at executive session, so I'll be looking for a motion to enter executive session to discuss contract negotiation and student enrollment matter. So there a motion. Terry's the first.
Do we need to, in the motion, do we need to ask who we're gonna keep with us in?
Yeah, we'll invite Julie in for that, and Laura for the,
Mr. Chairman, if it's a middle school student, I'd like to ask the principal to hold for school.
Alright, so we'll invite Dan in for that issue, and we'll invite Laura in as well for the transportation. Terry was the first, is there a second? Rennick's the second, alright, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Okay, so I need to get.
Alright, we are in executive session at 9:05.